The fog clung to the cobblestone streets of London like a shroud, muffling the distant chime of Big Ben on that fateful autumn evening in 1935. Lady Evelyn Harrington, mistress of Harrington Manor, lay sprawled in her opulent drawing-room, her lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling as if beholding a spectral vision. Clutched in her rigid hand was an antique silver locket, its chain broken, as though torn in a desperate struggle. No visible wounds marred her body, yet the room reeked of an unnatural chill. Whispers among the staff spoke of the phantom of the locket, a curse said to claim those who dared open its secret compartment. As the clock struck midnight, a faint, ethereal whisper seemed to echo. The truth lies within. Who or what had silenced Lady Evelyn forever? Chapter 1. The Arrival at Harrington Manor. The fog draped over the English countryside like a velvet curtain, softening the edges of the world as Hercule Poirot's taxi rattled along the gravel drive toward Harrington Manor. It was a crisp October morning in 1935, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, the kind of autumn day that seemed to whisper secrets. The manor emerged through the mist, its ivy-clad stone facade looming like a sentinel of the past, its tall windows glinting faintly under a reluctant sun. Poirot adjusted his immaculate mustache, his keen eyes scanning the estate with the precision of a watchmaker. A telegram from Inspector Japp had summoned him urgently from London, its words terse yet tantalizing. Mysterious death at Harrington Manor. Suspected poisoning. Family in disarray. Your expertise required. As the taxi halted with a creak, Poirot stepped onto the gravel, his patent leather shoes crunching with deliberate care. He smoothed his tailored coat, ensuring not a speck of dust marred its perfection, and inhaled the chill air. There was something else here, beneath the autumnal bouquet, a faint undercurrent of unease, as if the manor itself held its breath. The front door swung open, revealing Arthur Harrington, the master of the house, a man in his early 50s with a stern countenance and eyes shadowed by grief, or perhaps something less noble. His was cool, tinged with the scent of polished wood and something sharper, lavender perhaps, mingled with a trace of something acrid, almost chemical. Arthur's steps echoed as he guided Poirot to the drawing room, where the tragedy had unfolded. She was found here, Arthur said, pausing at the threshold. The room was opulent, with heavy velvet drapes, a roaring fireplace, and a grand piano draped in a silk shawl. Yet it felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves mourned. The maid, Lucy, discovered her just before midnight. Evelyn was sprawled on the rug, clutching that damned locket. No wounds, no blood, just lifeless. Poirot's gaze swept the room with methodical precision. The Persian rug bore faint impressions where Lady Evelyn had fallen. A delicate porcelain teacup lay overturned on a side table, its contents staining the lace doily beneath. Scattered pearls from a broken necklace gleamed in the firelight, and a faint chill lingered, unnatural for a room so warmly furnished. But it was the locket that drew his attention. A silver antique, intricately engraved with a spectral figure, its chain snapped as though torn in a struggle. It rested now on a velvet cushion, placed there by the police, its presence both beautiful and ominous. "This locket," Poirot said, his voice soft yet commanding. "It is significant, oui? Tell me its story." Arthur's jaw tightened. "It's a family heirloom, passed down from Evelyn's grandmother. They say it's cursed, some nonsense about a phantom that haunts its bearers. Evelyn was superstitious, she believed it. She'd been unwell lately, speaking of whispers, visions. I told her it was folly, but..." His voice broke, and he turned away, staring into the fire. Poirot's gray cells, as he called them, began to hum. A cursed locket, a death without visible cause, A family steeped in secrets. This was a puzzle worthy of his intellect. He knelt beside the rug, his gloved fingers tracing the air above the faint impressions, noting the position of the pearls, the angle of the teacup. "And the cause of death, monsieur? What says the police?" Inspector: "Betrayal. I thought she was losing her mind." Next, Reginald Harrington, Arthur's younger brother, a man in his late 40s with a gambler's charm and a nervous tic in his left eye. His tailored suit was slightly worn, hinting at financial strain. "Evelyn and I had our differences," he admitted, lighting a cigarette with unsteady hands. "She refused to help with my obligations. But murder? Preposterous." The butler, Mr. Graves, stood rigidly by the door, his gaunt face impassive, yet his eyes darting like a cornered animal's. A loyal servant of 20 years, he spoke little, but Poirot noted the calluses on his hands, unusual for a man of his station. "I served Lady Evelyn her tea, as always," Graves said. "Nothing amiss, sir." Finally, Miss Elena Voss, the governess to Clarissa's younger cousins, a striking woman with a pale complexion and an Eastern European accent. Her dark eyes held a depth that suggested secrets. "I saw something last night," she whispered, clutching a shawl. "A shadow in the corridor, holding the locket. It vanished when I screamed." Poirot listened, his mind cataloguing every word, every gesture. The locket, the poison, the whispers, each was a thread in a tapestry of deception. He requested to see the manor's other rooms, beginning with the garden shed, where Japp later informed him a vial of cyanide, used for pest control, had gone missing. Graves denied knowledge, but his fingers twitched. As evening descended, the fog thickened outside, wrapping the manor in an eerie silence. Poirot retired to the library, surrounded by leather-bound tomes and the faint scent of wax. He examined the locket under a magnifying glass, noting a tiny compartment within, unopened, and an inscription, "Eternal Love Betrayed." A photograph inside showed a young man, perhaps Evelyn's father, his face somber. The clues were mounting, but so were the questions. Why the locket? Why poison, delivered so subtly? And what of this phantom Miss Voss claimed to see? Poirot's logical mind dismissed superstition, yet the manor's atmosphere gnawed at him. The family's motives were clear. Clarissa's voice steady despite the tension. "The game. It has begun. But fear not, Hercule Poirot will unravel this enigma." Word count 2012. Chapter 2. Whispers from the Past. The library of Harrington Manor enveloped Hercule Poirot like a cocoon of secrets, its towering shelves heavy with leather-bound volumes and the faint musk of aged paper. The fire in the grate cast flickering shadows, dancing across the oak-panelled walls, as if mimicking the elusive phantom that haunted the household's whispers. It was late afternoon, the October light fading into a sullen dusk, and the fog outside pressed against the leaded windows, muffling the world beyond. Poirot sat at a mahogany desk, the silver locket before him, its intricate engravings catching the candlelight like a siren's call. His gloved fingers hovered over it, cautious yet curious, as his grey cells churned through the puzzle of Lady Evelyn Harrington's death. Inspector Japp had arrived earlier, his heavy footsteps announcing his presence long before he entered the room, puffing on his pipe with a mixture of frustration and deference. "Poison, Poirot," he said, tossing a preliminary autopsy report onto the desk. "Cyanide in her system, likely in the tea she drank before collapsing. No fingerprints on the cup but hers. Damned peculiar, if you ask me. Who could have slipped it in without her noticing?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément, mon ami. It is the method that intrigues. Cyanide is swift, silent, but requires precision. And this locket—" He lifted it delicately, as if it might whisper its secrets. "It is more than an heirloom, I think.
a key to the heart of this mystery. Japp snorted. "You and your keys, Poirot. The family's in a tizzy, pointing fingers. Arthur says it's that cursed Locket. Clarissa swears her mother was losing her mind. Reginald's dodging questions about his debts. The butler's too quiet. And that governess, Miss Voss, keeps babbling about ghosts. Load of nonsense, if you ask me." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Nonsense, perhaps, but even nonsense has a purpose when woven by a clever mind.
Locket, containing a lock of hair from a betrayed lover, brought doom to those who opened its secret compartment. Evelyn, it seemed, had been obsessed with it, wearing it constantly in her final weeks. "Let us speak with the suspects, one by one," Poirot said, rising with the grace of a cat. "Their words will reveal more than they intend." First came Reginald Harrington, Arthur's younger brother, whose charm was as worn as his threadbare cuffs. He lounged in a leather armchair, lighting a cigarette with hands that betrayed a slight tremor. His dark eyes flicked nervously toward the locket on the desk. "Evelyn and I had a row yesterday," he admitted, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "She refused to help with my financial embarrassments. Said I'd brought shame on the family. Harsh words, but murder? Absurd. I was in the billiard room all evening. Ask Graves." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "And these debts, monsieur, to whom do you owe?" Reginald shifted uncomfortably. "A gentleman's club in London. Unlucky streak at cards. Nothing sinister, I assure you." But Poirot noted the sweat beading on Reginald's brow, the way his fingers crushed the cigarette. A man in debt was a man with motive, and Reginald's alibi relied on the butler, a shaky foundation. Next, Miss Elena Voss entered, her presence as enigmatic as the fog outside. Her dark hair was pinned tightly, her pale face framed by a high-collared dress that seemed out of place in the modern 1930s. Her Eastern European accent lent her words a melodic weight. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "I saw something last night, before Lady Evelyn was found. A shadow in the corridor, cloaked in white, holding the locket. It whispered her name, then vanished like smoke." Poirot leaned forward, his mustache twitching. "A shadow, mademoiselle? Or perhaps a person, dressed to deceive?" Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "I know what I saw. In my country we respect such signs. Lady Evelyn believed the locket's spirit sought revenge for a betrayal long ago." Poirot's mind whirred. Voss's tale of a phantom was convenient. Perhaps polished floors. In the kitchen, he inspected the tea tray, noting the sugar bowl's lid was slightly askew. A faint trace of powder clung to its rim. Not sugar, but something finer, more ominous. He sent it to Japp for analysis, suspecting cyanide. Outside, in the garden shed, he found another clue. A missing vial of cyanide, used for pest control, as Japp had mentioned. The butler, Mr. Graves, hovered nearby, polishing a silver tray with unnecessary vigor. "I know nothing of it, sir," Graves said, his voice flat, but his eyes avoiding Poirot's. "I tend the garden, but poisons are locked away." Poirot's smile was thin. "Locked, yet missing. Curious, no?" Graves' hands trembled, and Poirot noted the calluses, perhaps from handling more than gardening tools. A red herring, perhaps, but the butler's nervousness suggested complicity, or at least knowledge. As evening fell, the manor grew oppressive, the fog pressing closer, as if conspiring to keep secrets within its walls. Poirot returned to the library, piecing together the puzzle. Evelyn's death was no accident. The cyanide required intent, opportunity. Arthur's grief seemed genuine, but his financial records, glimpsed by Japp, showed recent withdrawals, perhaps to cover an affair or a debt. Clarissa's engagement to Lionel Blake, the artist, gave her motive. Her mother's disapproval threatened her future, and the inheritance would secure it. Reginald's debts were a noose tightening around him. Graves's loyalty masked a grudge, perhaps from years of being overlooked. Voss's visions could be a clever act to deflect suspicion. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, a whisper, like silk brushing stone, emanating from the walls. He tilted his head, listening. The Manor's old pipes or something more deliberate? He followed the sound to a hidden panel behind a bookcase, revealing a narrow passage. Dust motes danced in the dim light, and a single footprint, small, feminine, marked the floor. Voss? Clarissa? Or another player in this deadly game? He emerged to find the household gathered in the hall, their faces pale in the candlelight. Clarissa clutched Lionel's arm,
that clung to Harrington Manor, casting a pallid glow over the overgrown gardens, where Hercule Poirot now walked, his cane sinking slightly into the dew-soaked earth. The air was sharp with the scent of roses and damp moss, but beneath it lingered a trace of something metallic, almost bitter, a hint, perhaps, of the poison that had claimed Lady Evelyn Harrington. It was October 1935, and the English countryside, with its golden leaves and mist-shrouded paths, seemed to guard its secrets as jealously as the Manor's inhabitants. Poirot's keen eyes scanned the grounds, his methodical mind cataloguing every detail, from the crunch of gravel underfoot to the faint rustle of a blackbird in the hedgerow. The mystery of Evelyn's death deepened with each hour, and the gardens, he sensed, held clues the house had yet to yield. He paused by a rosebush, its thorns catching the hem of his immaculate coat. A small footprint, pressed into the soft soil near the garden shed, caught his attention. Too delicate for a man's boot, too precise for a careless servant. He knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the impression, noting its size and the faint tread of a woman's shoe. "Curieux," he murmured, his mustache twitching. "The phantom, perhaps, takes a morning stroll?" Inspector Japp, trudging up the path with his pipe trailing smoke, chuckled. "Still chasing ghosts, Poirot? I'd wager that print belongs to Miss Voss or young Clarissa. But what's it doing by the shed? That's where the cyanide went missing." Poirot rose, brushing his hands. "Précisément, mon ami. The shed is a stage in this drama, and this footprint, a player's mark. Let us see what else it reveals." The shed was a weathered structure, half hidden by ivy, its door creaking as Poirot pushed it open. Inside, shelves held gardening tools, sacks of fertilizer, and a locked cabinet where poisons were stored. Japp had already confirmed the missing vial of cyanide, its absence noted by the head gardener, who swore the cabinet was secure the day before Evelyn's death.
Morbid, but he's harmless. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Harmless, perhaps. But love and money, they are powerful motives. Your mother's fortune. It would secure your future with Monsieur Blake, no? Clarissa paled, her lips parting in protest. "I'd never! Mother was going to give me the locket to sell for my dowry. She said it was cursed, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be with Lionel." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Poirot noted her motive, the inheritance, and perhaps the locket itself could fund her marriage against her mother's wishes. He thanked her and turned back to the shed, his mind sifting through possibilities. The footprint suggested a woman's involvement, but was it Clarissa's or another's? Miss Voss, with her tales of phantoms, had been near the corridor. Could she have slipped out here unnoticed? Returning to the manor, Poirot sought the victim's significance in the family's tangled web. Evelyn, Japp had learned, was set to reveal a secret at a dinner party the night of her death, a secret that could ruin reputations. Arthur, her husband, had withdrawn large sums recently.
possibly to cover an affair or debts. Reginald, the brother-in-law, owed money to unsavory lenders in London, his gambling a noose around his neck. Mr. Graves, the butler, harboured a quiet resentment, perhaps tied to a long-ago slight. Japp mentioned a dismissed cousin, once a footman here. Miss Voss's murky past as a medium suggested she might have blackmailed Evelyn, who knew of her fraud. Poirot's investigation took him to the drawing room, where Evelyn had died. The overturned teacup still lay on the side table, its stain now dry on the lace doily. He sniffed the air, detecting that faint, acrid note again, not lavender as he'd first thought, but something chemical, like cyanide residue. The pearls from Evelyn's broken necklace were scattered across the rug, their pattern suggesting a struggle, though the autopsy showed no marks of violence. The locket, now back in police custody, had been clutched in her hand. Why? Did she open it in her final moments, seeking answers? Or was it placed there to mislead?
Poirot gathered the household for tea in the parlour, a deliberate echo of Evelyn's final moments. The silver tea service gleamed, and he watched each suspect's reaction as Graves served. Arthur's hands shook as he took his cup. Reginald avoided the sugar bowl. Clarissa stared at her tea as if it might bite. Voss's eyes flicked to the locket, now displayed on a side table. Graves moved with mechanical precision, but Poirot noted a bead of sweat on his brow. "The poison," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the tense silence, "was in the sugar, mes amis. A subtle delivery, unnoticed by Lady Evelyn. But how did it reach her cup without detection? One of you knows." The room froze, eyes darting. Arthur cleared his throat. "Impossible. We were all at dinner." "Yet the sugar bowl was tampered with," Poirot countered, holding up a vial of white powder. Flour, not cyanide, but his bluff drew gasps. Who had access? Before answers could surface, a crash echoed from upstairs, shattering the tension. The household rushed to the source, Evelyn's bedroom, where the locket had been stored under police watch. The door stood ajar, the room in disarray. The locket was gone, its velvet cushion overturned, and a single rose petal lay on the floor. Its scent mingling with that same acrid note. Japp swore under his breath. "The phantom again, or a thief among us?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "No phantom, mon ami. A human hand, guided by fear or greed. But which hand?" The household stood frozen, their faces a gallery of guilt, fear, and defiance. Clarissa clutched Lionel's arm, whispering, "It's cursed, I told you." Reginald lit another cigarette, his hands shaking. Voss's lips moved silently, as if in prayer. Graves stood rigid, his eyes fixed on the floor. Arthur's face was a mask, but his clenched fists betrayed him. Poirot turned to the group, his voice calm, yet had deepened the mystery. And Poirot's grey cells worked tirelessly, weaving together the threads of poison, whispers, and a so-called phantom. He sat now across from Miss Elena Voss, the enigmatic governess, whose pale face and dark eyes betrayed a guarded intensity. Her hands, folded tightly in her lap, seemed to hold secrets as tightly as the locket held its curse. "Mademoiselle Voss," Poirot began, his voice soft yet piercing, "you intrigue me. You speak of shadows, of phantoms, yet you are a woman of education, no? From Romania, you say. Tell me, what brings you to this English manor, so far from your home?"
Voss's lips parted, then closed, as if weighing her words. Her accent, melodic yet precise, carried a hint of defiance. "I came seeking peace, Monsieur Poirot. In Bucharest, I faced difficulties. Lady Evelyn was kind to employ me as governess to her young cousins, but I swear I had no part in her death." Poirot leaned forward, his moustache twitching. "And yet, mademoiselle, you were in the corridor the night she died. You saw this shadow with the locket. Describe it again, if you please, every detail." Her gaze flickered to the parlor's window, where fog pressed against the glass. It was tall, cloaked in white, like a spectre. It held the locket, and it whispered Lady Evelyn's name, soft, like a sigh. I screamed, and it vanished into the darkness. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A spectre, or perhaps a person dressed to deceive. You have experience with such theatrics, no? Inspector Japp tells me you were once a medium, discredited for fraud. Voss stiffened, her hands clenching. That was years ago. I was young, desperate. I never meant harm. Lady Evelyn knew of my past. She forgave it. But she believed the locket was cursed, that it held a spirit seeking revenge for a betrayal. Poirot's mind whirred. Voss's story was convenient, a blend of superstition and deflection, yet her fear seemed genuine. Was she a pawn in a larger scheme, or vanished into thin air, like that blasted phantom everyone's on about? Poirot's smile was thin. "The locket has not vanished, nor has it been spirited away. It is hidden by a hand most human. But let us explore another clue, Arthur Harrington's finances." Japp produced a ledger, obtained from the family's solicitor. "Arthur doubled Evelyn's life insurance policy 6 months ago. Looks suspicious, doesn't it? A tidy sum if she died." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A red herring, perhaps? Money is a motive, but too obvious for a mind as subtle as our killer's. Let us dig deeper." He summoned Arthur Harrington, who entered with the weary gait of a man carrying a private burden. His stern face, lined with grief, masked something else: guilt, fear, or both. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice hoarse, "this talk of phantoms is madness. Evelyn was ill, delusional. She imagined things, whispers, shadows. I begged her to see a doctor, but she refused." "And the insurance, monsieur?" Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. "Why increase it so recently?" Arthur's jaw tightened. "Business troubles. The shipping company, Evelyn's inheritance, is faltering. I needed security for Clarissa's future. Nothing more." Poirot noted the sweat on Arthur's brow, the way his eyes avoided the locket's empty cushion. A man with secrets, perhaps an affair or financial ruin, but murder. The evidence was circumstantial, a distraction from the true path. The investigation deepened as Poirot revisited the drawing room where Evelyn had died. The overturned teacup, the scattered pearls, the faint acrid scent, all pointed to a calculated act. He recalled the footprint in the garden, likely Voss's or Clarissa's, and the missing cyanide vial. A new clue emerged, a scrap of fabric caught on a splinter in the shed's doorframe, dark blue and finely woven, like a man's coat. Arthur's, Reginald's, or another's? Poirot's methodical mind turned to the suspect's motives. Clarissa, desperate for her inheritance to marry Lionel, had opportunity but lacked guile. Reginald, drowning in gambling debts, might have... Her eyes wide. Reginald lit a cigarette, his fingers trembling. Graves stood rigid, his face a mask. Arthur stared into the fire, his fists clenched. Voss's lips moved silently, as if in prayer. Poirot's bluff deepened. "I have found traces of cyanide in the locket's compartment. The killer tampered with it, knowing Lady Evelyn's habit of opening it." A gasp escaped Voss. "Impossible.
I took it to protect it. From the phantom. Poirot spun toward her, his voice sharp. You took it, mademoiselle? From where? Her face drained of colour. I found it in Evelyn's room, after her death. I hid it in my trunk, fearing its curse. But I swear I meant no harm. Poirot's heart raced. A breakthrough or another diversion? He demanded to see her room. The household followed, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous halls. In Voss's Spartan quarters, Poirot opened her trunk, revealing the locket nestled among her shawls. Its silver gleamed, the phantom engraving almost mocking. Explain this, mademoiselle, he said, holding it aloft. Before she could answer, a shadow moved in the doorway. A figure, cloaked in darkness, lunged forward. Poirot ducked, but a heavy candlestick grazed his temple, sending him staggering. The room erupted in chaos, screams, footsteps, the crash of furniture. When Japp restored order, the figure was gone, and Poirot rubbed his head, his eyes blazing with determination. The phantom, he said, his voice steady despite the pain, is no ghost. It is a person, desperate to keep their secret. But Hercule Poirot will not be deterred. The household stood frozen, their faces a gallery of fear and suspicion. The locket, now in Japp's custody, seemed to pulse with secrets. As Poirot steadied himself, he heard it again, a faint whisper, not from the walls but from within the locket itself, as if its compartment held more than poison. The truth, he knew, was close, but the killer was close.
Chapter 5. Deductions in the Dark. The throbbing in Hercule Poirot's temple pulsed in rhythm with the ticking of the grandfather clock in Harrington Manor's library, where he now sat, a cold compress pressed to his head. The attack in Miss Voss's room had left him shaken but undeterred, his grey cells whirring with renewed vigor. It was the afternoon of the third day, October 1935, and the fog outside clung to the manor like a conspirator, muffling the world and amplifying the secrets within. The silver locket, recovered from Voss's trunk, lay on the desk before him, its phantom engraving glinting in the candlelight as if mocking his efforts. The blow to his head had been no accident, a warning, perhaps, from a killer growing desperate. But Poirot, with his unyielding logic, was closing in. Inspector Japp hovered nearby, his pipe unlit, his face a mask of concern. "Blimey, Poirot, you're lucky that candlestick didn't crack your skull. Who was that figure? One of the household or this blasted phantom everyone's on about?" Poirot's lips curved into a wry smile. "No phantom, mon ami. The figure was human, with a man's stride, too heavy for Mademoiselle Voss or Clarissa. But the footprint in the garden, that was feminine. We have multiple players, perhaps working together, perhaps not. The locket, it is the key." Japp scratched his head, glancing at the autopsy report on the desk. Cyanide in Lady Evelyn's tea, no doubt now. But the locket, why was it in her hand? And how did it end up in Voss's trunk? Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, his mind sifting through the evidence. The attack had clarified one thing. The killer feared his progress. He recalled the clues, the overturned teacup, the scattered pearls, the missing cyanide vial from the garden shed, the forged letter implicating Lionel, and now the locket's reappearance. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deception, woven with care. The feminine footprint suggested Voss or Clarissa, but the attacker's stride pointed to Arthur, spectres. Arthur sat rigidly, his eyes avoiding the locket. Clarissa clung to Lionel, her face pale. Reginald smoked nervously, his fingers stained with nicotine. Graves stood by the tea tray, his hands steady, but his eyes darting. Voss,
her shawl drawn tight, seemed to shrink into herself. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice commanding. "The locket is more than a trinket. It holds a secret, perhaps the poison itself. Lady Evelyn opened it often, no? In her melancholy she sought answers, but someone ensured those answers were fatal." A murmur rippled through the room. Clarissa spoke first, her voice trembling. "Mother was paranoid, Monsieur Poirot. She heard voices, saw things. She thought the locket was cursed, that it demanded her life." Poirot's eyes gleamed. Paranoia or manipulation? Let us consider the motives. He paced, cane tapping. "Mademoiselle Clarissa, you stand to inherit, securing your marriage. Monsieur Reginald, your debts are a noose, loosened by Evelyn's fortune. Monsieur Graves, your loyalty hides a grudge, your cousin's dismissal, perhaps. Mademoiselle Voss, your past as a medium suggests deceit. And Monsieur Arthur, the insurance policy, most convenient, no?" Arthur's face reddened. "How dare you? I loved Evelyn." "Love," Poirot said softly, "can coexist with betrayal." A new clue surfaced. Traces of cyanide on Graves's gardening gloves found in the shed. Japp had tested them, confirming the poison's presence. "Graves, you've got explaining to do," Japp growled. The butler's face remained impassive. "I handled the vial weeks ago, sir, for pests. I locked it away. Someone else took it." Poirot noted the lie. Graves's calloused hands suggested more than gardening. But was he the mastermind? Or a pawn? To test the household, Poirot staged a dramatic ploy. A séance, suggested by obtained by Japp, showed traces of sedatives in her system, possibly self-administered, heightening her susceptibility to visions. Had someone gaslighted her, using the locket's legend to drive her to despair? He confronted Voss again. "Mademoiselle, your visions, are they real or a performance?" She trembled, tears welling. "I saw things, yes, but I exaggerated. Evelyn paid me to stage séances, to contact her father. I needed the money." A confession, but not of murder. Poirot turned to the locket, opening its compartment with a delicate tool. Inside, beneath the photograph, was a folded paper, a will amendment, disinheriting Reginald in favor of Clarissa. "Voilà," Poirot said. "A motive for murder, hidden in plain sight." The room erupted in accusations. Reginald shouted, "I knew nothing of this!" Arthur's face darkened, his fists clenching. Clarissa sobbed, "Mother wanted to protect me." But before Poirot could press further, a gunshot rang out from the study, shattering the tension. The household rushed down the hall, Japp leading with his revolver drawn. The study door swung open to reveal Reginald, slumped over the desk, a pistol in his hand, blood pooling beneath him. A note lay beside him, scrawled in haste. "I killed Evelyn. Forgive me." Japp swore. "Suicide? Case closed?" Poirot knelt by the body, his eyes narrowing. "No, mon ami. The handwriting. It mismatches his earlier letters. The bullet's angle is impossible for self-infliction. This is murder, staged to silence him." The household stood frozen, their faces a gallery of shock and fear. The locket, still in Poirot's hand, seemed heavier, its secrets multiplying. The killer had struck again, but why Reginald? Had he known too much, or was he another diversion? Poirot's grey cells burned with questions, but one truth was clear. The phantom was no ghost, but a human, desperate to bury the truth in blood. Chapter 6. The case closed?
Poirot's moustache twitched, his expression one of quiet disdain. No, mon ami.
The case, it is far from closed. Observe the note, the handwriting. It is too neat, too deliberate. Reginald's letters, they were scrawled, erratic. This is a forgery. And the bullet. He pointed to the wound in Reginald's temple, the angle sharp and unnatural. The trajectory. It is impossible for a self-inflicted shot. Someone stood before him, fired, and placed the pistol in his hand. Japp swore under his breath, rising to his feet. Another murder, then? Blimey, Poirot, this killer's got nerve. But why Reginald? He was a wastrel, sure, but harmless enough. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light of the study's chandelier. Harmless, perhaps. But he knew something dangerous to the killer. The locket, the poison, the whispers, they are all connected, and Reginald was a thread they could not afford to leave dangling. The household gathered in the doorway, their faces a gallery of shock and suspicion. Arthur Harrington stood rigid, his stern features pale, his fists clenched, as if restraining a storm within. Clarissa clung to Lionel Blake, her auburn hair dishevelled, tears streaking her face. Mr. Graves, the butler, hovered at the back, his gaunt face impassive, but his eyes flickering with unease. Miss Helena Voss, her shawl drawn tight, murmured something inaudible, her dark eyes fixed on the locket, now in Japp's custody. Lionel, the artist, stood protectively by Clarissa, his bohemian scarf askew, his gaze darting between the body and Poirot. Poirot paced the study, his cane tapping rhythmically on the polished floor. The room was a time capsule of wealth, leather-bound books, a marble bust, a fireplace crackling with embers, but the air held a chill, as if the manor itself recoiled from the violence. He examined the pistol, a Webley revolver, noting its polished grip bore no fingerprints but Reginald's. A careful killer, he murmured, wiping the weapon clean before placing it. But they forgot one thing, the smell. Japp sniffed the air, cutting through the tension. Mes amis, this is no suicide. Reginald was murdered to silence him, just as Lady Evelyn was poisoned to hide a secret. The Locket's will changed everything. Reginald lost his inheritance, but who gained? Clarissa's sob broke the silence. Mother wanted to protect me, to ensure I could marry Lionel. But I didn't want her money, not like this. Arthur's voice was hoarse. Evelyn was unwell, Poirot. She changed the will in a fit of delusion. Reginald was furious, but he'd never— Poirot raised a hand. Never? Yet someone did. Let us consider the motives anew. He paced, his mind sifting through the suspects. Clarissa, desperate for her inheritance, had opportunity, but seemed too emotional for such cold calculation. Arthur's doubled insurance policy suggested greed, or perhaps an affair covered by wealth. Graves's cyanide-tainted gloves and hidden grudge pointed to revenge. Voss's visions and fraudulent past hinted at blackmail. Lionel, though seemingly peripheral, painted ghosts, perhaps a clue to his involvement? To probe deeper, Poirot requested a tour of Reginald's room. The household trailed him, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous halls. The room was sparse, a bachelor's retreat with a cluttered desk and a half-empty bottle of whiskey. Poirot sifted through papers, finding gambling receipts and a threatening letter from a London lender. Pay by month's end, or face consequences. A motive for Reginald to act rashly, but not to die. A new clue emerged, a torn scrap of fabric, dark blue, caught in the desk's drawer, matching the piece from the garden shed. This, Poirot said, holding it aloft, "is from the killer's coat. Arthur, your coat is blue, non?" Arthur's face reddened. "So is half the manor's wardrobe. You accuse me based on a thread?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Not accuse, monsieur. Observe. The truth, it reveals itself in pieces." The psychological layer of the mystery deepened. Evelyn's medical records, reviewed earlier, showed sedatives that could have heightened her paranoia, making her susceptible to the Locket's curse. Had someone destroy it, but I refused. A partial truth, Poirot sensed, but her confession shifted suspicion. He turned to Graves. "And you, monsieur? Your gloves bore cyanide. Did Reginald know of your involvement?" Graves's face remained stoic. "I told you, sir. I handled the vial for gardening. I knew nothing of Reginald's plans." The tension peaked as Poirot confronted Arthur. "Your coat, monsieur, matches the fabric, and your wife's insurance, most convenient. Did Reginald discover your secret?" Arthur's fists clenched, his voice rising. "I won't stand for this. I loved Evelyn." But as he spoke, he bolted from the room, his footsteps echoing into the fog-shrouded night. The household gasped, and Japp gave chase, only to return minutes later, breathless. "He's back. Claims he saw the phantom in the garden. Says it chased him." Poirot's mind raced. Arthur's flight was telling, but was it guilt or fear? The fabric, the cyanide, the forged note, all pointed to a conspiracy, but the killer's identity remained elusive. The locket, now in Japp's pocket, seemed to pulse with secrets, its compartment a Pandora's box of motives. As the household dispersed, Poirot lingered in the study, the bloodstain on the desk a grim reminder of the stakes. The whisper came again, faint but deliberate, from the walls, a mechanical hum, not supernatural. He traced it to a vent, finding a hidden wire leading to a speaker, another trick to fuel the phantom myth. The killer was close, their web tightening, but Poirot was closer still, his logic cutting through the fog of deceit. Chapter 7. Unraveling Threads. The drawing room of Harrington Manor glowed with the amber light of the fireplace, its crackling embers casting shadows that danced like spectres across the velvet drapes. It was the evening of the third day, October 1935, and the fog outside clung to the windows, as if the manor were a ship adrift in a sea of mist. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, immaculate figure commanding the attention of the gathered household. The silver locket, recovered and now resting on a mahogany table, gleamed like an accusation. The tension, precise and deliberate. "Mes amis, we stand in the very room where Lady Evelyn met her end, poisoned by cyanide in her tea. And now, Monsieur Reginald, silenced by a bullet staged as suicide. The phantom of the locket, it is said, claims its victims. But I, Hercule Poirot, declare this phantom is no ghost. It is a fabrication, woven by a human hand, to mask greed, betrayal, or revenge." A murmur rippled through the room. Clarissa's voice trembled. "Then who, Monsieur Poirot? Who could do such things?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his cane tapping rhythmically. "To answer, we must unravel the threads. Let us begin with the locket." He lifted it, its silver catching the firelight. It held a will amendment, disinheriting Reginald. This gives motive to some, but not all. The cyanide, it was in the sugar, a method requiring access and opportunity. The whispers, the visions, they were tricks, yes, but tricks with a purpose. He turned to Graves, whose hands twitched slightly. "Monsieur Graves, your gloves bore traces of cyanide. You claim it was from gardening, but the vial was stolen, and the gramophone, hidden to mimic whispers. Your knowledge of the manor's passages suggests you could place it." Graves' face remained impassive, but his voice was tight. "I served the family faithfully, sir. I'd never harm Lady Evelyn." Poirot nodded,
his gaze shifting to Voss. "Mademoiselle Voss, you admitted to faking seances for Evelyn, exploiting her belief in the locket's curse. You stole the locket, you say, to protect it. Yet your visions fuel this phantom myth. Are you a pawn or a player?" Voss's lips quivered. "I swear, I only wanted to help her. Reginald pressured me, but I refused to destroy the will." Poirot's mind sifted through the clues. The feminine footprint in the garden, likely Voss's or Clarissa's. The blue fabric from Arthur's coat. The forged note in Reginald's hand. The hidden speaker in the vent. Each pointed to a conspiracy, but the mastermind remained elusive. He staged a dramatic reveal, opening the locket to display the
Dismissed them as circumstantial. The true breakthrough came from Japp, who had found a hidden ledger in Reginald's room, detailing payments to a mysterious EV, not Evelyn, but Elena Voss. "Blackmail," Japp whispered to Poirot. "She's deeper in this than she lets on." Poirot confronted Voss again, his voice sharp. "Mademoiselle, you received money from Reginald. For what? To stage the phantom? To poison the tea?" Voss's eyes widened, tears spilling. "He paid me to keep silent about his debts, not to kill. I swear, I only hid the locket to stop the curse." Her confession rang partial, but Poirot pressed further, turning to Arthur. "Monsieur Harrington, your coat matches the fabric found in the shed and Reginald's room. Your insurance policy doubled recently, and your flight into the fog, fear or guilt?" Arthur's face darkened, his voice rising. "I ran because I saw it. The phantom, in the garden. I'm no killer, Poirot." But Poirot's gray cells were aligning the pieces. The cyanide required access to the tea tray, Graves or Voss. The forged note required knowledge of Reginald's hand, Arthur or Clarissa. The speaker in the vent suggested technical skill, Graves perhaps, or an accomplice. And the locket's compartment, tampered with, hinted at a plan to exploit Evelyn's paranoia. To test his theory, Poirot staged a final gambit. He gathered the household around the tea tray, recreating the fatal evening. "The sugar," he said, lifting the bowl, "was poisoned here, under your noses. But how? One of you is a master of deception." As he spoke, he sprinkled a pinch of sugar, flour in truth, into a cup, watching their reactions. Graves flinched, Voss's hands trembled, Arthur's eyes darted to the door. Clarissa buried her face in Lionel's shoulder. Then, a revelation. Poirot noticed a faint scratch on the sugar bowl's lid, a mark from a tool, suggesting tampering after the tea was poured. "The killer," he declared, "added the cyanide after Graves served, knowing Evelyn took 2 sugars. A precise act, requiring intimacy with her habits." Scheme. As the tension peaked, a scream echoed from the attic, shattering the standoff. The household rushed upstairs, Poirot leading with his cane. The attic door creaked open, revealing a chilling sight. A white cloak, draped over a chair, with the locket's chain dangling from it, as if the phantom had returned. But Poirot's keen eye spotted a wire trailing to a hidden speaker, another mechanical trick. "The phantom," he said, his voice steady, "is a lie. But the killer is here, among us, and their mask is slipping." The household stood frozen, their faces a tableau of fear and defiance. The locket, now in Poirot's hand, seemed to pulse with secrets, its compartment a silent witness to murder. The truth was close, but the killer was closer, their next move hidden in the fog of deception. Chapter 8. The Locket's Revelation. The library of Harrington Manor was a sanctuary of shadows, its towering shelves and flickering candles creating an atmosphere thick with secrets. It was the evening of the 4th day, October 1935, and the fog outside wrapped the estate in a suffocating embrace, as if conspiring to guard the truth. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, the silver locket in his gloved hand,
its phantom engraving catching the firelight like a whispered taunt. The murders of Lady Evelyn Harrington and her brother-in-law Reginald had cast a pall over the household, and the discovery of the Locket's hidden will amendment, disinheriting Reginald in favor of Clarissa, had tightened the web of suspicion. Poirot's gray cells thrummed with clarity, yet the killer's identity remained a shadow, elusive but close. The air was heavy with the scent of wax and old leather, undercut by a faint, acrid trace of cyanide, a reminder of the poison that had sparked this deadly game. Inspector Japp stood by the fireplace, his pipe unlit, his face etched with frustration. 2 bodies, Poirot, and this cursed locket at the heart of it. The will's a motive, sure, but who's pulling the strings? Arthur? Voss? That butler's too quiet for my liking. Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes gleaming. Patience, mon ami. The locket, it speaks to us, but not—
Shawl drawn tight, murmured something inaudible, her gaze fixed on the locket. Lionel's bohemian scarf was askew, his artist's hands fidgeting as if sketching an escape. Poirot paced, his cane tapping rhythmically on the polished floor. The locket's compartment was tampered with, mes amis. Not a curse, but a trap. Evelyn's death was no accident. She was poisoned by her own hand, but guided by another's cunning. The question is, who set this trap? Clarissa's voice broke the silence, trembling. Mother was paranoid, Monsieur Poirot. She'd been hearing whispers, seeing shadows. She thought the locket was alive, demanding her life. But I didn't. I couldn't. Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was unrelenting. Paranoia, mademoiselle, or manipulation. Let us consider the psychological game. He turned to Japp, who had uncovered Evelyn's medical records. Traces of sedatives, possibly self-administered, had heightened her susceptibility to visions. Someone, Poirot said, used the locket's legend to gaslight Lady Evelyn, driving her to open it in fear or desperation. The cyanide was her doom, but the killer's hand was invisible. Japp nodded, producing a new clue. A bundle of letters found in Evelyn's writing desk, hidden behind a false panel. Love letters, he said, addressed to Arthur, but not in Evelyn's hand. Signed E. Could be Elena Voss. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A motive, perhaps, love, betrayal, or greed. He turned to Arthur, whose face flushed with anger or guilt. Monsieur Harrington, these letters suggest an affair. Did Evelyn discover them? Did she threaten to expose you, prompting her death? Arthur sprang to his feet, his voice booming. Lies! I loved Evelyn, despite our troubles. Those letters are old, before our marriage. But Poirot noted the sweat on Arthur's brow, the tremor in his hands. The blue fabric from his coat, found in the shed and Reginald's room, tied him to the crimes. And the insurance policy, doubled recently, suggested a financial motive. Yet the letters— Locket's curse, the whispers, the visions, the staged phantom appearances, all were designed to push her toward opening the fatal compartment. But Reginald's murder suggested he had uncovered the plot, perhaps confronting the killer. A new revelation surfaced. Japp had found a hidden ledger in Arthur's study, detailing payments to a London chemist for cyanide, dated weeks before Evelyn's death. Arthur, Japp said, this looks bad. Planning something, were you? Arthur's face darkened. Business expenses, pest control for the estate. You've no proof. But Poirot's logic tightened the net. The cyanide in the locket required intimate knowledge of Evelyn's habits. Arthur, as her husband, had that. The forged note in Reginald's hand matched Arthur's precise handwriting, not Reginald's scrawl. And the blue fabric tied Arthur to the shed and the murder scene. Poirot staged a final test. placing the locket on the table and inviting each suspect to touch it. "The killer," he said, "fears this locket, for it holds their guilt." Arthur hesitated, his hand hovering. Voss recoiled. Graves remained still. Clarissa wept. Lionel stared, transfixed. Then, a breakthrough. Poirot noticed a faint scratch on Arthur's cufflink, matching the mark on the locket's chain. "Monsieur Harrington," he said, his voice sharp, "you handled the locket recently, no? To place the cyanide." Before Arthur could respond, Voss leapt to her feet, a hidden dagger glinting in her hand. "Enough!" she cried, lunging toward Poirot. Japp reacted swiftly, tackling her to the ground, the dagger clattering across the floor. The room erupted in chaos. Clarissa screamed. Lionel shielded her. Graves stepped back, and Arthur froze, his face a mask of horror. Poirot, unshaken, dusted his coat. "Merci, Japp. Mademoiselle Voss, your desperation betrays you. But are you the killer, or a partner in crime?" Voss sobbed, her defiance crumbling. "Arthur, he promised me everything. He said Evelyn was a burden." The shadows that seemed to writhe like spectres. It was the late evening of the 4th day, October 1935, and the fog outside had thickened into a suffocating shroud, wrapping the estate in an eerie silence broken only by the distant creak of the manor's ancient timbers. The silver locket, its cyanide-tainted compartment now a silent witness to murder, rested in Inspector Japp's custody, but its secrets continued to unravel the tangled web of deceit surrounding the deaths of Lady Evelyn Harrington and her brother-in-law Reginald. Poirot's grey cells buzzed with the certainty that the killer, or killers, stood among the household, their masks slipping under his relentless logic. Inspector Japp, his revolver still drawn from restraining Voss, wiped his brow, his voice gruff. "Blimey, Poirot, that was close. Voss nearly had you. She's confessed to staging the hauntings, but says Arthur's the mastermind. Is she telling the truth or covering her own tracks?" Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Mademoiselle Voss is a piece of the puzzle, mon ami, but not the whole picture. Her dagger, her tears, they betray desperation, perhaps love, perhaps fear. But Arthur Harrington, he is the linchpin. Let us confront the truth." The household stood in a tense tableau. Arthur Harrington, his stern face now ashen, his hands clenched into fists. Clarissa, sobbing quietly beside her fiancé Lionel Blake, whose artist's eyes darted nervously. Mr. Graves, the butler, rigid as ever, his gaunt features betraying a flicker of unease, and Voss, now restrained by Japp, her dark hair dishevelled, her defiance crumbling into sobs. The air was heavy with the scent of wax and wood smoke, laced with the faint, acrid trace of cyanide that seemed to cling to the manor's very walls. Poirot paced, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the marble floor. "Mes amis," he began, his voice commanding, "the locket has revealed its secret, a will amendment, disinheriting Reginald and favouring Mademoiselle Clarissa. But it also held cyanide, placed to exploit Lady Evelyn's habit of opening it in her melancholy. This was no accident. It was murder, planned with precision, and to prey on Evelyn's paranoia, heightened by sedatives. But the poison required a steadier hand, one with intimate knowledge of Evelyn's habits. He turned to Arthur, his voice sharp. "Monsieur Harrington, your affair with Mademoiselle Voss is clear from the letters. Your financial ruin, debts from the shipping company, gave you motive. The insurance policy, doubled recently, would save you, and the fabric from your coat, found in the shed and Reginald's room, ties you to both crimes." Arthur's face reddened, his fists unclenching. "You twist everything, Poirot. I loved Evelyn, despite our troubles. The fabric, anyone could have planted it." Poirot's smile was thin. "Yet the scratch on your cufflink matches the locket's chain. You handled it, no? To place the cyanide?" Before Arthur could respond, Clarissa stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "Stop it. I know you suspect me, Monsieur Poirot, because of the inheritance, but I loved Mother. I didn't want her money, not like this. And Lionel, he's innocent." Lionel nodded, his bohemian scarf askew. "I painted ghosts, yes, but only for art. I wasn't here when Evelyn died." Poirot's gaze shifted to Lionel, recalling the faint smear of paint on the locket's chain, matching his palette. "Monsieur Blake, you touched the locket recently, oui? Perhaps during its theft?" Lionel paled. "I sketched it for a painting, that's all. Clarissa showed it to me weeks ago." A partial truth, Poirot sensed, but he turned to Graves. "Monsieur Graves, your gloves bore cyanide, and your knowledge of the manor's passages allowed you to place the gramophone. Did Arthur enlist you, or did you act for your own revenge? Your cousin's dismissal, perhaps?" Graves' face remained impassive. "I served faithfully, sir. I know nothing of poison or gramophones." Poirot's logic tightened the net. The evidence pointed to a partnership. Arthur, driven by financial desperation and an affair with Voss. Voss, staging the phantom to manipulate Evelyn. Graves, complicit in planting the speaker and perhaps the poison. But Reginald's murder suggested a deeper conspiracy. Someone had staged his suicide to frame.
Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Yet it matches the poison in Evelyn's tea and the locket. And your handwriting, monsieur. It matches the forged note found with Reginald."
The household gasped, but before Poirot could press further, a figure appeared at the hall's entrance, a cloaked silhouette, holding a replica locket, its chain glinting. Clarissa screamed, "The phantom!" Voss fainted, and Arthur staggered back, but Poirot, unshaken, recognized the figure. Lionel, his artist's cloak mimicking the ghost he painted. "Lionel!" Clarissa cried, pulling away. "What are you doing?" Lionel dropped the cloak, his face pale but resolute. "I wanted to prove Clarissa's innocence. I staged this to show the phantom's a fake. Someone's using it to scare us." Poirot's mind raced. Lionel's act, though reckless, confirmed the phantom was a human construct. But it also suggested he knew more than he admitted. The paint on the locket, his access through Clarissa. Could he be complicit? As Japp restrained Lionel for questioning, Poirot confronted the group. "The truth emerges. Arthur and Voss planned Evelyn's death, using the locket to deliver poison. Graves aided with the whispers, blackmailed by his past. Reginald uncovered their scheme, so Arthur killed him, forging the note. But one question remains. Was there another hand?" The hall fell silent, the fog outside pressing closer. Clarissa, tears streaming, whispered, "I'm innocent, I swear." Graves' eyes flickered, betraying a crack in his stoic facade. Voss, now silent, stared at Arthur with a mix of love and betrayal. Arthur's shoulders slumped, his defiance fading. Poirot's voice was steady. "The net closes, mes amis. Tomorrow we will gather all evidence, and the killer will face justice. But tonight, the phantom watches, and so does Hercule Poirot." As the household dispersed, the whisper came again, faint but deliberate, from the walls. Poirot traced it to another hidden speaker, its wire leading to the attic. The killer's tricks were unraveling, but their desperation was growing. The truth was, face a mask of apprehension, guilt, or defiance. Inspector Japp flanked Poirot, his revolver at the ready, sensing the climax of this deadly drama. Poirot's voice, clear and commanding, cut through the silence. "Mes amis, we have reached the end of this affair. The locket, this so-called cursed relic, has revealed its secrets, not of ghosts, but of human greed, betrayal, and murder.
Lady Evelyn was poisoned by cyanide in her tea and locket, a trap set by a cunning mind. Reginald was silenced with a bullet, staged as a suicide. The phantom, it was never real, a fabrication to mask the truth. Today, Hercule Poirot will lay bare the killer. The household stirred, eyes darting. Arthur's stern face was pale, his hands trembling. Clarissa clutched Lionel's arm, her auburn hair framing a tear-streaked face. Graves stood rigid, his butler's composure fraying at the edges. Voss, her shawl loose, stared at the locket with a mix of fear and resignation. Lionel's artist's hands fidgeted, his bohemian scarf a stark contrast to the manor's somber air. Poirot paced, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm on the marble floor. Let us reconstruct the crime, step by step, with the logic of the grey cells. Lady Evelyn, a woman of wealth and melancholy, was haunted by the locket's legend, a tale of betrayal from her father's past. Her sedatives, self-administered, heightened her paranoia, making her susceptible to manipulation. The killer exploited this, planting whispers with a hidden gramophone, staging visions of a phantom, and tampering with the locket's compartment to hold cyanide. He held up the locket, its silver glinting. The poison was placed where Evelyn would touch it, knowing her habit of opening it in distress. The tea, laced with cyanide via the sugar, ensured her death. But who had the knowledge, the opportunity, and the motive? Jap, holding a bundle of evidence, letters, a vial, a ledger, nodded. We've got the lot, Poirot. Love letters from Voss to Arthur. Cyanide under Arthur's floorboards. His visions, exploiting Evelyn's fears. You hid the locket in your trunk, claiming to protect it. But your dagger, your desperation, were you Arthur's accomplice or his puppet? Voss's tears fell freely. I loved Arthur. He promised we'd be free, that Evelyn's death would save the estate. I staged the phantom, yes, but I didn't poison her, I swear. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Graves. Monsieur Graves, your gloves bore cyanide, and your knowledge of the manor's passages allowed you to place the gramophone and speaker. Your cousin's dismissal gave you a grudge. Were you blackmailed into aiding Arthur, or did you seek revenge? Graves's face remained stoic, but his voice cracked. I served faithfully, sir. I knew nothing of poison beyond the garden shed. Poirot's mind sifted through the clues. The feminine footprint in the garden, likely Voss's, the cyanide vial under Arthur's floorboards, the paint smear on the locket, matching Lionel's palette, the forged note in Arthur's hand. The psychological manipulation of Evelyn, gaslighting her with whispers and visions, required coordination, suggesting a partnership. Reginald's murder, staged to frame him, showed the killer's desperation to tie up loose ends. To seal his deduction, Poirot staged a final reveal. He placed the locket on the hall's grand table, its compartment open, revealing the will amendment and the faint cyanide residue. The killer, he said, used Evelyn's paranoia, her sedatives, to ensure she opened this locket. The tea was a backup, ensuring death. Reginald discovered the plot. Perhaps he saw Arthur with the locket, or Voss with the speaker, so he was killed. His suicide staged. Clarissa sobbed. But who, Monsieur Poirot? Who did this to Mother? Poirot's voice was steady. The mastermind is Arthur Harrington. He orchestrated Evelyn's death, driven by financial ruin and his affair with Voss. He placed cyanide in the locket, knowing Evelyn's habit. Voss staged the hauntings, amplifying Evelyn's fear. Graves, blackmailed by his past, planted the gramophone and speaker, creating the phantom's whispers. When Graves following under arrest as an accomplice. The manor seemed to exhale. its oppressive air lifting as justice took hold. Poirot stood alone, the locket in his hand, its secrets laid bare. "The mind," he said softly, "is the true phantom, mes amis. It conjures fears, hides truths, but cannot escape the logic of Hercule Poirot." As he stepped into the fog, the manor loomed behind him, its shadows at peace. The locket, now evidence, would haunt no more, its curse broken by reason.